Hi, I'm Lily, and I'm 31 years old. I just got married to Larry, who is 9 years older than me. But let's go back a little, shall we? Let me tell you about the day Larry and I first met. It was at one of those fancy garden parties our parents loved to host. I was 20, just out of high school, and Larry was 29, the new rising star at his father's company. I remember him walking up to me with a glass of champagne in his hand. "Lily, right?" he asked, his voice smooth as silk. "I've heard a lot about you." I blushed, unsure of what to say. "And you're Larry. I've heard a lot about you too," I replied. He laughed, a sound that made my heart skip a beat. "Hopefully all good things," he said. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and, to my surprise, connecting in a way I hadn't expected. That night, our parents saw us together and started thinking about us getting married. It took a few more years, but eventually their plan worked out. Before we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement. It was straightforward. If one of us cheated, the other could end the marriage and walk away with $7 million. I had no intention of cheating, so I signed it without a second thought. I remember the day we signed that agreement. My dad, a man of few words, but with a big heart, looked at me with concern. "Are you sure you're okay with this, Lily?" he asked, his voice steady but with a hint of worry. "Dad, it's fine," I reassured him, giving him a quick hug. "I trust Larry and he trusts me. This is just a formality." Larry was there too, and he was the one who insisted on signing the paper. "I don't want you to feel pressured, Lily," he said, his voice sounding a bit tense. "If you're not comfortable with this, we can talk about it more." But I just shook my head and smiled at him. "Larry, I'm fine with it," I said. "I trust you," I said. He seemed relieved and gave me a warm smile. "And I trust you, Lily," he replied. That was the beginning of our journey together. We got married in a grand ceremony that everyone talked about. I was excited about starting this new chapter in my life, completely unaware of the storm that was on the horizon. After the wedding, we moved into a beautiful house just outside the city. It felt like a dream come true living with Larry and waking up next to him every morning. He was sweet, caring, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. Our honeymoon was like something out of a fairy tale. We spent 3 weeks at a gorgeous beach resort, soaking up the sun and enjoying each other's company. But when we returned home, things began to change. Larry became a different person, distant, always lost in thought. He started coming home late from work and would go straight to bed without even saying goodnight. We began sleeping in separate rooms, eating at different times, and barely talking to each other. One day, I decided to confront him. "Larry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "what's going on? You've been acting strange ever since we got back from our honeymoon." He looked at me, his eyes no longer filled with the warmth they once had. "I've just been busy with work, Lily," he replied, avoiding eye contact. "But we hardly talk anymore," I continued. "We're living like strangers in our own home." He sighed, running his fingers through his hair. "I know, Lily. I'm sorry. I'll try to make more time for us." But nothing changed. In fact, things got worse. Larry started coming home even later, sometimes not until the early morning. He stopped eating with me, and we barely saw each other. I began to have doubts. Was he seeing someone else? The thought made me feel sick, but I couldn't ignore the signs. I decided to confront him again. "Larry," I said one night when he came home late, "are you seeing someone else?" He looked shocked by my question. "What? No, Lily, I would never do that to you." "Then why are you always out? You never spend time with me," I said, tears filling my eyes. "I told you, it's just work," he said firmly. "I'm not cheating on you, Lily." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Larry was not the same man I had married. He was distant, cold, and seemed to be hiding something. I didn't know what to do. I loved Larry, but I couldn't keep living like this. I decided to start investigating. If Larry wasn't going to tell me what was happening, I needed to find out for myself. I began by checking his phone when he was in the shower. I felt guilty for invading his privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I didn't find any suspicious messages or calls, but I did find something that made my heart sink. Larry had been searching for apartments. Was he planning to leave me? I confronted him about it. Larry, why are you looking for apartments? Are you planning on leaving me? He looked shocked. No, Lily, I was just looking. I wasn't planning on leaving you. Then why were you looking? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know, Lily, he said, barely whispering. I just need some space. One day, I decided to talk to my mom about it. She's always been my support, the person I turn to when things get tough. Mom, I said, I don't know what to do. Larry has changed. He's not the same person anymore. My mom listened, concern written all over her face. Lily, she said, you're both still adjusting. You're newlyweds. It takes time to build a life together. I wanted to believe her, to think that this was just a phase and that things would get better. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Larry was hiding something. I could feel it. I tried to push the feeling away, tried to convince myself that Mom was right, but the nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't go away, constantly reminding me that something was off. 3 weeks later, I gathered my courage and approached Larry. I need a job, I said, looking him in the eye. He seemed surprised. You want to work? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. Yes, I need to do something, Larry. I can't just sit at home all day. He thought for a moment, then said, I can offer you a job at my foundation. We help kids in tough situations. Would you be interested? I was surprised. Larry's foundation was well known for its work with children, and I had always admired what they did. Yes, I said without hesitation. I'd love to. Working at the foundation was a breath of fresh air. I was busy, and I was doing something meaningful. I met kids who were strong and resilient, kids who had gone through more hardships than any child should. It was heartbreaking, but also inspiring. The job kept me busy and helped me take my mind off the problems at home. Larry and I were struggling, but at least during the day, I had something else to focus on. The work was tough and emotionally draining, but it was worth it. I felt like I was making a difference, like I was doing something important. For the first time in a long while, I felt happy. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Larry was acting strange and distant. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I knew something was off, and I was determined to find out. With a heavy heart full of questions and doubts, I decided to hire a private detective. I needed to know if Larry was cheating on me. It wasn't just about my pride. It was about my peace of mind. I couldn't live with constant uncertainty, always wondering what had gone wrong. There was also the prenup we signed before getting married. If Larry was cheating, it wouldn't just be a betrayal, it would be a costly mistake. I found a detective agency in the city run by a man named Tyler. He was an ex-cop, a seasoned veteran with a sharp eye and a no-nonsense attitude. I told him my story and my suspicions. He listened, his face expressionless. I'll do my best, Lily, he said when I finished, but I can't promise anything. If your husband is cheating, he's doing a good job of hiding it. I nodded, understanding. I just need to know, Tyler. One way or another, I need to know. I remember the day he came back to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes filled with sympathy. I'm sorry, Lily, he said. I couldn't find any evidence that your husband is cheating on you. I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of me was glad that Larry wasn't cheating, but another part of me was frustrated. If he wasn't cheating, then why did he leave? What was he hiding? Are you sure, Tyler? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There's nothing at all. Tyler shook his head. I'm sorry, Lily. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. I thanked Tyler and paid him for his services. As I watched him leave, I felt a deep sense of loss. I was back where I started, with more questions than answers. One day, while I was working at a charity event, a new guy walked in. His name was John. He was handsome, with a smile that could light up the room. He was smart, with a quick wit and sharp mind. He was funny, with a sense of humor that made everyone laugh. He looked like a famous actor, with his chiseled features and striking good looks. In short, he was my ideal man. But despite being drawn to John, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. His arrival seemed too perfect, too convenient. I couldn't help but think about Larry and our prenup. If I was caught cheating, I'd have to pay a huge sum of $7 million. Could John be a trap set by Larry to catch me? I decided to hire Tyler, the private detective I had used before. I asked him to investigate John and see if he had any connections to Larry. Tyler agreed to take the case and started digging into John's past and connections. He followed him, watched his movements and interactions. Tyler was thorough, leaving no stone unturned. In the meantime, I tried to keep my distance from John. It was hard, especially since he was so charming and attractive, but I had to be careful. I couldn't afford to fall into a trap, not when so much was at stake. One day, John asked me out for coffee. I was torn. Part of me wanted to say yes, to get to know him better. But another part of me was scared, worried about what Tyler might find. "I'd love to, John," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'm really busy right now. Maybe some other time." John seemed disappointed but didn't push. "Sure, Lily," he said, his smile fading a bit. "Some other time." I felt a pang of guilt. What if I was wrong? What if John was just a nice guy, and I was letting my suspicions ruin something good? But I couldn't take the risk, not until I knew for sure. 5 days later, Tyler came to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes hard. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, "but your suspicions were right. John is working for your husband." I felt a rush of emotions, anger at Larry for trying to trap me, relief that I hadn't fallen for it, and sadness that John wasn't who I thought he was. But above all, I felt a sense of vindication. I wasn't imagining things, my suspicions were real. "Thank you, Tyler," I said, my voice catching with emotion. "You've done a great job." As I watched Tyler leave, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had dodged a bullet and avoided a costly mistake. But I also felt like I had lost something, the idea of the perfect man and the hope of finding love again. It was a hard truth to accept, but I wasn't going to let it bring me down. I was stronger than that. I was determined to move on and find happiness again. I didn't need an ideal man. I just needed someone who was real and honest, and I was going to find that person no matter what. Instead of sending John packing right then, I decided to take a different approach. I chose to play along and befriend him, all while keeping my behavior above board, so Larry would have no reason to accuse me of anything. John, however, took my friendliness as a sign of something more. He started to relax, thinking he had me fooled. The irony was that he was the one being played, but I didn't let him in on the secret. I couldn't risk him running back to Larry, so I kept up the act and maintained a friendly facade. One day, I decided to take things up a notch. I asked John to join me for lunch, making it sound like a casual discussion about charity work. He agreed, with a smug smile on his face, thinking he was making progress. We found a quiet spot in the cafe. "So John," I began, "how are you finding the charity work?" He shrugged, a confident look in his eyes. "It's good, different but good." "And Larry?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you think of him?" John looked surprised. "Larry? He's okay, I guess. Why?" I shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just curious. He's a bit of a mystery, isn't he?" John laughed, clearly relieved. "Yeah, he can be hard to figure out." We continued chatting about work and life, and I made sure to keep my tone neutral, not giving him any reason to be suspicious. In the days that followed, I continued to play along, keeping up the friendly act, but never crossing the line. I was always on guard, always careful. It was a risky game, but one I was willing to play for now. One day, during one of our lunch meetings, John looked at me with a serious expression. "You know, I've been thinking," John said. I raised an eyebrow, feeling a chill run down my spine. "About what?" I asked. He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. About us, about this thing between us. My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been dreading. I forced a smile. And what is it that we have, John? He looked at me with a hopeful expression. I think we have something special. I felt a pang of guilt. John was falling into my trap, just as I had planned, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. Still, I had to keep up the act, had to keep playing the game. So I smiled at John, a fake smile plastered on my face. Yes, John, I said, my voice barely a whisper. We do have something special. And just like that, the trap was set. The game was on, but at what cost? The Cold War at home with Larry was as icy as ever. We'd occasionally run into each other, exchange chilly greetings, and then retreat to our separate corners. Most nights, he stayed at his apartment, claiming it was more convenient for his work. One Friday afternoon, I called John. I laced my voice with warmth as fake as his documents, inviting him over to my place. He probably thought I was finally ready to give in to his advances. Poor guy, he couldn't have been more wrong. When John stepped into my home, he was greeted not by a seductive housewife, but by my old classmate, now a stern-faced police officer. The surprise on John's face was worth every bit of it. The officer checked John's papers, and as expected, they were as fake as a $5 bill. Now it was my turn to make a move. I offered John a choice. He could either stick with Larry and face the consequences of his fake documents, or he could switch sides and work for me. John's eyes darted between me and the officer, and after a moment of silence, he nodded. He agreed to my deal. Checkmate, Larry. With that, the real game began. I had Larry's pawn now playing on my side, but I knew this was just the beginning. Larry was a crafty man. He wouldn't go down without a fight. In the days that followed, I kept a close watch on John. Despite his agreement, I knew I couldn't fully trust him. He was a wild card, a potential threat, but for the time being, he was a useful one. One day, I called John to my office. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. He looked at me, a hint of unease in his eyes. "About what?" "About Larry," I replied. "I need to know everything, his plans, his strategies, everything." John hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you everything." I knew I had my insider, and my counterattack was ready. But this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. Larry wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be prepared. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was war, and in war, there are no rules, only survival. Days turned into weeks, and I was getting anxious. I wanted to confront Larry, to show him I wasn't the pushover he thought I was. Tyler, who I turned to again, gave me some advice. "Push Larry," he suggested. "Make him think you've fallen into his trap." It was a gamble, but I was ready to play the game. So John and I staged a photo shoot. We posed in ways that could be seen as compromising, like proof of an affair, but we were careful. We kept the original photos, where everything was as innocent as a Friday school picnic. Once the photos were ready, I handed them to John. "Give these to Larry," I said, passing him the envelope. "Let him draw his own conclusions." John looked at me, concern on his face. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Once you start this, there's no going back." "I know," I replied, my voice firm, "and I'm ready." The very next day, Larry was all smiles at dinner. He thought he'd caught me, that he had the upper hand, but he didn't say a word about it. I wasn't worried. I knew what was coming, and I was ready. Meanwhile, Tyler was on the case, digging up dirt on Larry and finding all the evidence we needed. He was good at his job, and I trusted him. Finally, Tyler called me. "Larry's relaxed and has let his guard down," he said, his voice full of satisfaction. "I've got him. I've got all the proof photos, videos, everything." I felt a surge of excitement. "Good," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "Let's bring him down." But I didn't confront Larry, not yet. I wanted him to think he was winning. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized he'd been played. So I waited. I played the part of the dutiful wife, biding my time until Larry made his move. I knew what was coming, and I was ready. The clock was ticking towards the family dinner. I knew this was it, the showdown. Strangely, I felt calm. I was ready. The dinner was at Larry's parents' luxury mansion, a huge estate that screamed old money. Larry was there, of course, playing the role of the perfect son and husband. But I knew the truth, and soon everyone else would too. We were halfway through the main course when Larry cleared his throat and stood up, a smug smile on his face. "I have something to say," he announced, looking straight at me. He pulled out a set of photos of me with John and tossed them on the table like he was holding a winning hand. "Proof," he said, his voice full of triumph, "of my wife's infidelity." The room went silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. I was ready for this. I calmly stood up and met Larry's gaze. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I know this man, but he's not my lover. He's an actor hired by you, Larry, to frame me." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The room filled with John's voice, confessing everything. Larry's smile faded, and his eyes widened in shock, but I wasn't done. I pulled out my own set of photos and videos evidence of Larry's affairs. I tossed them on the table. "What about these, Larry?" I asked, my voice cold. "Can you explain them?" Larry stammered, trying to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. His parents' faces turned to stone. My parents, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "You ungrateful brat," my father roared at Larry. "We trusted you with our daughter, and this is how you repay us." Larry's mother was in tears. "How could you, Larry?" she sobbed. "How could you do this to us, to her?" The aftermath was swift. We divorced. Larry's parents, furious at their son's deceit, fired him from their company. His reputation was in ruins. As for me, I walked away with $7 million in compensation. Now, Larry is jobless, scrambling to piece his life back together, while I'm free. I'm enjoying the peace and quiet, the freedom from him. I won. I took on Larry and won. I outsmarted him and played his own game better than he did. And it feels good. It feels right.